Welcome to The Explainer. So, what if I told you that the United States is basically a modern Roman Empire? I know it sounds a little out there, but our source material makes that exact claim. It argues that the nation we know today wasn't just founded, but was literally forged through centuries of brutal conflict and conquest.
You see, from its very first moments, the story of this nation is just steeped in struggle. The source material doesn't paint this picture of a peaceful settlement. No, it talks about a series of remarkable wars that ultimately gave birth to a new country. It's like conflict is baked right into its DNA.
So, the big question is, how did this all happen? How do you get from that to this? Well, we're going to trace the answer by exploring four fundamental conflicts that shaped the United States: the fight for its very existence, the debate over how to govern, the bloody quest for more land, and finally, the battle for the Union itself.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. It all kicks off with the British colonies. After the 7 Years' War, which was incredibly expensive, Britain was drowning in debt. And their solution? Well, it was to slap a bunch of new taxes on the American colonies. Now, this did more than just annoy people. It ignited this fierce, fiery debate over the very meaning of rights and representation.
And what's just wild to me when you look at this timeline is how fast everything escalated. I mean, we're talking about just over a decade to go from boycotts over sugar to all-out war. Every move Parliament made was met with an even stronger reaction from the colonies, and it just kept pushing both sides further and further apart, right up until that fateful morning at Lexington and Concord. You know, the point of no return.
And then, this. This is the moment that changed everything. With these words, the Second Continental Congress did something absolutely revolutionary. They stopped arguing about their rights as British citizens, and by adopting the Declaration of Independence, they declared themselves citizens of a brand new, sovereign nation. A total game changer.
But, declaring sovereignty is one thing. Winning it? That was a brutal, near-impossible task. I mean, after some humiliating defeats in 1776, Washington's surprise attacks at Trenton and Princeton were this desperate shot in the arm that kept the revolution alive. But the real turning point? That was the victory at Saratoga. That was the proof the world needed that, hey, these Americans might actually win. And that was enough to convince France to jump in. That alliance, that was the final key to victory at Yorktown.
Okay, so winning the war was one thing, a huge thing, but it was just the first impossible task. Now came this massive question of governance. How do you actually build a single country out of 13 very different, very stubborn, and fiercely independent states?
Yeah, their first try, it did not go well. The Articles of Confederation were, frankly, a disaster. They created a central government that was so weak it couldn't manage the economy, couldn't enforce its own laws, and couldn't even put down internal uprisings like Shays' Rebellion, where you had frustrated farmers literally taking up arms. The new nation was basically falling apart before it even got started.
And this is where they got smart. This slide really shows the solution perfectly. They didn't just try to patch up the Articles. They threw the whole thing out and started over with the Constitution. And this thing was radical for its time. It created a powerful federal government, but split it into 3 co-equal branches, all designed to check and balance each other. It was a blueprint for a republic on a scale the world had never, ever seen before.
So, with this new, strong government in place, the young nation turned its eyes westward. It was driven by this powerful new idea, an ideology that would define the next 100 years and answer the big question of territory.
That idea was called manifest destiny. It was this incredibly powerful belief that the United States had a God-given right, a destiny to expand from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. And this conviction, it fueled a relentless, and as we're about to see, often brutal push right across the continent.
And the sheer scale of this expansion was just staggering. You take the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, that didn't just add a bit of land, it literally doubled the size of the country overnight. Then, fast forward to the Mexican-American War in the 1840s, and bam, another 1 million-plus square miles are added. We're talking about the land that would become California, Nevada, Utah, and Arizona, a huge chunk of the modern U.S.
But here's the thing. This destiny came at a terrible, terrible price for the people who already lived on that land. The 1830 Indian Removal Act forcibly ripped over 60,000 Native Americans from their ancestral homes in the Southeast. An estimated 15,000 men, women, and children died during the forced march west, a tragedy that became known, fittingly, as the Trail of Tears.
So all of this relentless expansion, it created a crisis that was just unavoidable. Every single new square mile of territory forced the nation to confront its most explosive and divisive issue. It was the question of the Union, and whether that Union would be built on free soil or on the backs of enslaved people.
You see, for decades, the country was just held together by these flimsy, fragile compromises. But each one was like putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It only delayed the inevitable and made things worse. From the Missouri Compromise to the outright violence of bleeding Kansas, the country was literally tearing itself apart. And the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, a man who opposed the expansion of slavery, well, that was the final spark that lit the fuse.
So when war finally exploded, the odds were just stacked so heavily against the South. I mean, this chart tells the whole story. The Union had huge advantages in population, which meant bigger armies. It had the industrial power to churn out weapons and supplies, and it had a navy to blockade southern ports. The Confederacy, which was mostly agricultural, just couldn't compete in a long, drawn-out war.
But advantages on paper, they don't even begin to capture the human cost. This war was long and it was devastatingly bloody. From the first shots fired at Fort Sumter in 1861 to General Lee's surrender 4 years later, the Civil War became the single deadliest conflict in American history. We're talking more than 600,000 lives lost.
So in the end, the Union victory settled two absolutely monumental questions. First, it definitively answered whether a state could just up and leave the Union. The answer was a hard no. And second, with the passage of the 13th Amendment, it finally, officially, abolished the institution of slavery in the United States.
But okay, ending the war, ending slavery, that raised this profound new challenge. An unfinished question that you could argue the country is still wrestling with today. What did it truly mean to be a citizen in these now reunited states?
And for a short, hopeful time called Reconstruction, it really seemed like the nation was ready to live up to the ideals it was founded on. 3 revolutionary amendments were passed, one to abolish slavery, another to grant citizenship and equal protection to everyone born in the U.S., and a third to guarantee the right to vote for Black men.
But that promise, it was broken. Deliberately.
In 1877, to settle a really messy, contested presidential election, a backroom political deal was made. And the price of peace? The federal government agreed to pull its troops out of the South. And just like that, Reconstruction was over. Tragically. That withdrawal of troops abandoned millions of newly freed citizens. It ushered in a century of segregation and oppression that we know as Jim Crow, and it left this painful legacy, which raises one last provocative question for us. The United States was forged in the fire of these 4 great conflicts over sovereignty, government, territory, and union. If you look around today, are any of them truly over?